Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Butternomics. I'm your host, Brandon Butler, founder and CEO of Butter ATL, and today, got a special guest in the building. When he's not out here building, huge apps and huge tech companies and fiddling around with AI, or just generally, just rabble-rousing people sometimes, because, you know what I'm saying, he knows how to get the people going. The one, the only, Mr. Isaac Hayes III. Sir, how you doing today?
I'm good, man. What's up?
Hey, man, if I was any better, I'd be you, brother.
No, it's the other way around.
Glad to see you up in here, man.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me, man.
Hey, man, I appreciate you. Appreciate you. Now, look, man, I'm sure people, think they know or got some perspectives and all that stuff, but we do something a little bit different here at Butternomics, man. What I like to do to start off is I asked ChatGPT to write a bio on my guests. So I'm gonna read you the bio that ChatGPT wrote about you. I want you to tell me if it's on, if it's off, what we looking like, if it's missing anything. Okay, so all I put in was, what do you know about Isaac Hayes III in Atlanta? That's all I gave it. This is what it came back with. Isaac Hayes III is a music producer, voice actor, and tech entrepreneur, and the founder and CEO of Fanbase, a social media platform focused on monetization and equity for creators, especially those from underrepresented communities. He's the son of legendary soul musician Isaac Hayes, and while he carries the weight of that legacy, he's carved out a distinctly modern path rooted in ownership and innovation. Before launching Fanbase, Hayes has a strong career in the music and entertainment industry, producing tracks for artists like Little Scrappy, Keke Palmer, and Redman, and lending his voice to shows like The Boondocks. Over time, he became increasingly focused at the intersection of Black culture and tech, realizing that while Black creators fuel global trends, they rarely benefit from the platforms they build value for. That insight led him to create Fanbase, a hybrid of Instagram and Patreon where users can follow creators for free or subscribe for exclusive content. The goal isn't just likes or views, but ownership. Hayes raised millions through equity crowdfunding, making Fanbase one of the few Black-owned social platforms to secure that level of public investment. He's outspoken about the need for Black culture to move from influence to infrastructure and to stop being the engine and start owning the vehicle. He's also deeply rooted in Atlanta, where Fanbase is based, and continues to be a vocal advocate for building tech and media ecosystems that reflect and serve the communities driving culture forward.
Wow.
That's what we're just talking about AI. That's what AI got to say.
Wow. Thank you, AI. I think that's pretty accurate.
That's pretty good. I didn't know the Boondocks. Whose voice you doing on the Boondocks, man?
I did one. I did Aqua Teen. I did little stuff though. I did big stuff on Aqua Teen. I never did have like a recurring character on a lot of shows.
What part of Aqua Teen? I used to watch Aqua Teen Hunger Force.
The Brood Witch.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the demonic sandwich. Yeah.
Man, look at that, man. And now you're in here building tech companies, man. Well, look, we'll get to all that, man. But just tell people, like, what made you actually pivot to that after being in the music and entertainment space for so long?
I had no plans on building a tech startup. Zero. I was born in Memphis, Tennessee, moved to Atlanta when I was 3. I have always loved social media. I've been on Instagram. I was on everything before, right when it started. And so I was on Instagram in 2018, and I saw this kid go viral from Memphis, Tennessee, and he was dancing in a Spider-Man costume in a GameStop to Aha, Take On Me, and he went viral. He was Black. I shot him a DM, said, hey, congrats, young Memphis. And he hit me back, was like, yo, are you a manager? Do you manage people? I need a manager. Here's my number. I'll come to Atlanta. I was like, slow down, kid. He was like 17. I was like, no. But I understood the urgency that he was trying to capitalize on the momentum he had from going viral. And I was like, yo, I've been thinking about building an app, ironically, but I was like, we need an app where people can follow people like Instagram, but subscribe to the very same person like you would subscribe to Netflix, but make it a social media platform. And that is what led me to say, okay, I think we need to build this, but I'm not from the tech business. So I just started researching competitors first, like what else is out there at the time. And the only 2 companies I could find were Patreon, founded in 2013, which was just a website, and then OnlyFans, which was just a website, but it was highly pornographic. But there was no mobile app that allowed you to actually mobilely subscribe to someone like you would a game or like Spotify or Apple Music.
Yeah. And I mean, even when building that out, like there have been things that you all have done from a fan base standpoint that like didn't even exist from a feature. Like I think with the ability to subscribe and stuff like that are things that you all helped create essentially.
In-app purchase subscription, like peer-to-peer, didn't exist before Fanbase. And I know that sounds, I like to talk about that because I want people, especially black people, to know that your innovations are real, and you may think that someone else in this entire planet has the idea that you have, but in the entire 9 billion people on this planet, no one had ever built an app to say, hey, I want to easily subscribe to another person the same way I subscribe to a video game or something like that. And then Apple wouldn't let us build it at first. And I was scared shitless because I had spent like $200,000 to start to build this app. But they gave us some rules. They told us some things that we could and couldn't do. We followed their rules, and then we launched an MVP of Fanbase that allowed you to subscribe to a person using Apple Pay and Google Pay.
What do you remember most about that time, like before it even got launched, right? Like, because again, there's a lot of people that don't come from the tech space, like you said, you didn't come from, and they don't really understand what it really takes to build something like that, especially from a money standpoint, or just from like, what do you remember most about those early days when you all were just again like working through the prototypes and early iterations of the app?
I was just excited, and it's so funny because I was so excited at the the future of what this is going to be, and I still am because people still, I don't think, understand what fan base can do or where we are right now in the world. I was excited about. I'm just running numbers. I'm looking at platforms like, well, why are these platforms not letting you see all the people that want to see the content you want to see? So my point is, like, if I'm someone like, Beyonce, and I have 311 million followers, why can't 311 million people see what she posts? And I was just like, that's crazy. And I said, oh, I know why. Because the moment that video got added to social media, everybody became a television network, essentially. There's a lot of quiet things that social media platforms don't want people to know. So they act like they don't exist, but they do. So to everybody out there, every single person that has a social media platform, you're a television network. So Beyonce has 311 million people that follow her on social media. So that means that she has 3 times the reach of the Super Bowl, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And Super Bowl commercial costs $8 million for a minute. So if someone wanted to post a 1-minute video on Beyonce's page and reach 311 million people, she could charge $24 million for every post that she posted and never work again. Then I went to look at her views, and I was like, wait, her videos only have like 9 million views, 4 million views, and 13 million views, and 27 million views. It was never consistent. And I was like, oh, they're doing that because then the brands would come directly to Beyonce and never spend money running ads on Facebook or Instagram. And so that's the part that I was excited about, is the disruption. Because I see so much how black culture is always the oil and never the well, the gas but never the vehicle. And we're not taught, but we are indoctrinated to be excited about the few that make it as opposed to the many that benefit from the culture. And I was excited to be able to break that wall. I want to break that wall down where black culture gets compensated on an infrastructure level for the energy and the creativity and the revenue it brings to all these businesses.
Yeah, no, that's dope when you say it's the oil and not the well. Like, why do you think that is? I mean, I've seen things because I was in the tech space as well, and I've talked to people about even stuff as simple as just getting access to capital. But why do you think it is that we only on one side but not on the other side of that equation?
It's intentional. It's done by design. Well, first, I mean, historically, you got to think black people did that, and then our businesses were burned and destroyed, and we were murdered. And let's keep it 100. Like, they ran you out of your town. Tulsa had oil wells and banks and telephone companies, and they burnt all that stuff down and bombed it. And so that was the first, phase. And then you're getting into more into the Jim Crow South, where it was illegal. You couldn't do this, and we didn't want you to do this, and moving with redlining and stuff like that. And so now we've moved into an era now where technology has kind of connected all of us in a way that we have the ability to elevate businesses and scale them. So I just think it was done by design, and we got used to it. We just kind of got beat down, like, oh, they'll never let okay, and this is something that's important that I have to say. My optimism comes from, or my belief comes from, what I saw my father do. So we get used to saying, oh, like, they'll never let no black man be president. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. So I remember when my father was going to get the Oscar, he was going around and meeting people. He was nominated for an Academy Award. and he could potentially be the first black man to ever win an Academy Award for music. And people around Memphis and around were saying, they ain't gonna let no nigga win no Oscar. You know what I mean? Like, that ain't finna happen. And he did it. And so a lot of times I always think about that moment when it's like, oh yeah, they're not gonna let you do anything. It's like, well, it's not about letting you do anything. It's also about the conviction and the belief and the faith that you can, and then the preparation and the effort and energy that you put into it. The effort and energy that my father put into creating music and being a great musician and studying the craft. So I felt like if I put that amount of energy into learning tech and understanding it and the business of it, that I could break down that wall.
Do you think a lot of that comes from, again, like watching him grow up? I've seen you talk about how you manage the estate now. You've done things to help make sure you're securing, the royalties and ownership. Like you kind of learn all that just watching. Because I don't know, like, was he necessarily teaching you, or were you just seeing it and kind of just noticing how the game worked and saying, when I get a chance to kind of play this game, like let me make sure I'm doing it the right way.
Well, that was the that was the difference between why I didn't last very long in the music business. I didn't last very long. Reason being is because I entered it with this hesitation and a bias of already knowing that it was a very cutthroat business. And I saw my father lose easily probably $100 million that he never saw, that our family never saw. One, because he filed for bankruptcy a year before I was born, but not because he spent his money, but because the label he was signed to, Stax Records, owed him about $12 million in 1974, which is like $50, $60 million today. He took out a loan. He defaulted on his loan. So instead of garnishing your income stream, right, which is like, okay, like, they'll garnish your check. All right. They took my father's asset. So they took the actual ownership of his writer shares. And then at some point in like the early 80s, they got auctioned off for like 50 grand to two white guys. There were only two people that showed up to an auction. Those two individuals wound up purchasing Isaac Hayes' rights, his songwriting rights, royalties, 4 years before sampling came out. So you got to think all the 90s records that sampled Isaac Hayes, Tupac, Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, Biggie, Wu-Tang Clan, all these songs over the last 35 years have made about $60 million that our family never saw. And so coming into the music business, I never wanted that. My publishing was always, I held on to it like, if I can't own my publishing, I'm not doing any deals to cut people in on parts of that. And I didn't last very long. So I learned about music licensing. So music licensing is, oh, you want the permission to use my song in this movie? Here you go. I get a check, do that. And I just took my entire catalog, put it in this company, and then my music started winding up on like, Love and Hip Hop and Real Housewives and NBA on TNT and stuff like that. And I would just go to the mailbox every quarter and get a check. But I was still music adjacent, but it gave me the understanding of how to navigate the music business without compromising ownership of what I do.
You definitely have a deep understanding of that. One thing I'd love you to explain, is this is something I always even struggle with, is like, can you explain publishing? How does publishing work? Because I hear people talk about it, like owning your publishing and all that stuff. I feel like you can break it down in a way that's going to be very easy to understand.
Yeah. So publishing is basically a pizza. You cut it in half. Half of it is publishing. The other half is writer shares. The publishing side has all the legal control to say who can and cannot use that music. Simultaneously, whatever money comes to the publisher, they get paid. By law, they split that with the writer. So if $100 comes in, whoever the company is pays the publisher $100. It's up for the publisher to pay the writer the $50, and they keep the other $50. So that's typically what happens. So in situations like that, a lot of times publishing companies will come along and purchase the rights for a length of time, years, for the publishing that you're going to make off songs and give you an advance, not knowing whether you're going to be an amazing songwriter or a crappy songwriter. It's an investment. But imagine I give you $100,000 for 50% of your publishing, right? So now it's it's like, I get the publishing, you get your writers, we're splitting that, and now you go on and make $60 million writing songs over the next 10 years, and I just gave you $100,000. That's why it's like, oh, you know what I'm saying? It's the worst loan ever. If I could explain it if I could explain a publishing deal, I can explain a publishing deal like this, it'd be terrible. Let's say you had a pizza restaurant and you had $1 million worth of pre-orders of pizza, right? But you would only get paid over the course of a year. I walk in and say, Brandon, I'll give you the $1 million you're about to make off this pizza restaurant in this first year right now. So you don't have to wait all the way till 2026 to get your $1 million. Cool. You got to pay me that $1 million back. But now every other pizza restaurant you open for the next 10 pizza restaurants, I get 50% of the revenue. Terrible deal.
No.
Terrible. Terrible deal.
And that's how these deals are actually working.
Yep, that's how those deals work. They're terrible deals. But you got to think these are very, very creative people, talented, in not the best financial situations. They want to get out of hard times. So $100,000 to somebody is like, yo, I'm out. You know what I'm saying? Not knowing that you just gave up $24 million, over the next 10 years.
So what's your perspective on why all these companies are buying up all these, these artists, publishing and all these artists, all their records and albums and stuff like that?
I mean, two reasons. It's again, now this is, I have mixed reviews on this. I have mixed views because people wanted to come and buy my father's publishing from us, but I did not do that. And you've seen a lot of other artists start to sell their writer, actually still their writer shares, not even their publishing, because their publishing hasn't even reverted yet, which is a whole nother thing. But the writer side that I talk about, they're able to sell those. And so I have mixed feelings about that, but they're getting these large sums of money up front that before 15, 20 years ago, it might not have been a good idea. But now there's so many ways to take large amounts of capital and invest it into things and startups and stuff like that. You could take it. So you've seen people like The Dream sell a portion of his catalog, but then he might open up a whole bunch of Popeye's chicken franchises. So he can take that money immediately and do that. And he's still alive, so he can still perform and write songs and do all that kind of stuff. So those deals are doing that. They're buying that catalog because streaming has nowhere near peaked in the amount of revenue it's ever going to make. So when you think about music, so when you think about the people on planet Earth that have a smartphone in their hand that could have a music streaming service on it, it's about 6 billion people. All right. So currently, there's probably about 670 million people that have music streaming services on their phone. So think about that. There's another, 5 billion people that could have Spotify or Apple Music if they wanted to. So the amount of money that's going to be made off streaming is going to be trillions of dollars. So buying it now and being able to hold it for the next 30, 40 years, it's a lot of wealth there. And then also, you got to remember, because of streaming gave infinite revenue to records that it didn't have before. So even my father's catalog of songs my father wrote. So my father wrote this song called "Hold On, I'm Coming" by Sam and Dave. Before streaming, the only way he would make money off that is they played it on the radio, an oldie station, or somebody went into some old mom and pop store and bought the 45. Now with streaming, it's available globally, worldwide, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So now it's an infinite revenue cycle that's there. So every song ever created has the opportunity to make money. And also those songs have the ability to go viral years later or become popular way after the fact. So when you've seen records like Sure Thing, like my Miguel, that went viral maybe 2 years ago, but that record came out he wrote that record in like 2008. He made more money off that record 2 years ago than he did when he wrote it and they released it on an album. So you got to think about all the songs that are going to go viral that were written over the last 30, 40 years. And so whoever owns the publishing on that is sitting on a potential gold mine.
So how does that then relate back to creators and what you're doing now? Like, you see the same opportunities, you see the need for equity, but like, how does all that stuff that you learned now roll into what you're building with Fanbase?
So it was cool because like when I got into the tech space, I started asking questions about the business first. First thing I did when I came with Fanbase is trademark the name. The next thing I did is I incorporated the company. I created 2 classes of stock, voting and non-voting shares. This is all before I raised money because I thought about, again, as a black person, I always have this like anxiety, like somebody's going to try to steal my shit. So I trademarked the name. I remember that Steve Jobs was a brilliant innovator, but he got kicked out of Apple. And I was like, how did that happen? And that's because he had a board. And then the board had board seats and voting shares and all that kind of stuff. I said, I don't want that. And then I saw that Zuckerberg had done that with Facebook, where they created 2 classes of stock, and he had the majority of the voting shares, so he could never get kicked out of the company. So I said, yeah, I want that. And then I said, okay, I need to build. So now I have the ability to go as far as I possibly can And the only thing that's really in my way at this point now is money, is how we're going to raise the money to be able to do that. So when I look at content creators who generate billions of views that don't get the credit or the compensation that other creators who are usually white get, because it's great business. And I explain this all the time to people that get mad about the inequity of black creators versus white creators. They should not get mad at that, and they should not be mad at the creators. So for every Charlie D'Amelio or Addison Rae or all these people that get famous that are white on TikTok, and they get that dance from some young black girl, like Jalea Harmon or whatever, right? You can't be mad at Charlie D'Amelio and those individuals, because that's what TikTok and these apps do. You do the dance, I do the dance. You do the trend, I do the trend, right? The problem is that these platforms are based on advertising. And so again, as I always say, things presented or sold by white people are typically deemed to be for all people. Things presented by black people are deemed to only be for black people. So if you're advertising something, if you want to cast the widest net of people that might buy your product, it behooves you to have a white face, a young white girl selling Dunkin' Donuts coffee, than a young black girl trying to sell Dunkin' Donuts coffee. So therefore, it behooves platforms like TikTok and Instagram to have very, very famous white creators to be able to sell more ads. The inequity happens that they're taking this content and then they're not getting paid the brand deals. They're not getting paid, the black creators aren't getting paid the brand deals and all that kind of stuff. So when you move out of ad revenue and that bias that exists and you go straight to talent and support and subscriptions, then it's like, okay, you can subscribe to support me in the content that I create for whatever I do. I don't care if I'm doing makeup, I'm dancing, telling jokes, singing, whatever it is, gardening, it doesn't matter. So now we have a level playing field where people can scale businesses through subscription and not have to worry about those games that get played on social media platforms with advertising.
Yeah, I mean, coming from the advertising space, it's what you call general market versus multicultural. And it's like super weird because and I was talking about this. It's like weird because yeah, if you're essentially a cis white male, right? Like you're considered general market, and that means you can advertise to anybody. But if you have any ounce of melanin or any kind of, if you're a woman, if you have any kind of color, all of a sudden you get relegated like to multicultural, and you only, for whatever reason, consider can talk like that specific audience of people. And it's always weird because when you think about the way, even way culture looks like culture, like what is multicultural? Like culture is everybody. There's all kinds of people in it. So this idea that if you look a certain way, you can only like again, like you only get the brief for like a Black History Month and Cinco de Mayo. But then, if you're not, you can get it for anything. And that's how advertising industry has worked for a long time. So now we're trying to flip it on our head and say, no, there's like general market is multicultural. But to your point, that's why those ad dollars go that direction.
What exactly, and that's very, very frustrating, because now you have a world of creators that are breaking their necks to try to create all these views and doing things that are inauthentic to who they really want to be. So now I got to post 5 dance videos a day, all that, and that's not even really what I want to do. I'm just doing this so hopefully I'll get a brand deal and make some money, as opposed to when you see the success of streamers that are doing things like on Twitch, like Kai Cenat, where he just gets to authentically be himself and make more money without having to actually dance, sing, or whatever. He just gets to be himself, and then people support him. And what I love about the mistake that I think people are making is that you think that subscriptions are all about content, but it's about support. Kai Cenat doesn't provide any content exclusively. His subscribers just come because they want to support him, right, on Twitch. So he hadn't even gone the exclusive route yet. So even people are detached from the fact that people will support you and pay for content. You just don't know it. Humans are transactional. We're not stingy. For every reason, I don't know why people think that humans are just have money and just hoard it. We will openly give money to a multitude of things that we care about, want to support, or whatever. So that route opens up the door for the average individual to make more money being a content creator than having a 9-to-5 job. I always harken it to people I know people with millions and millions of followers on social media that are broke, right? But I tell people, imagine out of a planet of 6 billion people, if you could find 5,000 people to pay you $2.50 a month, right? That's $12,500 a month. That's $150,000 a year. That's more than 97% of Americans make, right? Meanwhile, that means you can make more. You don't have to go work for nobody, do anything. You literally could just get up every day, be yourself, and make $150,000 a year. And that's the tip. We're not even talking about really famous people or people with extreme talent that people are willing to pay to see people perform, like Beyonce, or athletes like Anthony Edwards and stuff like that. We haven't even gotten to that point, and now you're getting to people where I can make hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars with subscriptions, more than what the industries that exist pay me. So I say Fanbase is going to allow a musician to make more money than he can make in the record industry. It's going to allow an actor and actress to make more money than they could do working for a movie studio or a TV studio. It's going to allow an athlete to make more money than they could playing for a sports team. That's the disruption that flips it on its head, because there's nothing in between you and whoever has a smartphone and the ability to hit subscribe to pay you directly. And that's the most disruptive thing about Fanbase. And the reason why none of these other apps have even begun to do that is because they are these seismic giant tankers of advertising that can't turn on a dime. 97.5% of Facebook's revenue is through advertising. They can't go to subscription. They can't even begin to stop. The company runs off of advertising, and they double and triple down on the fact that there is advertising. And so for me, I'm just a little speedboat in the water to say subscriptions, tipping, and get to do that, and it gives us an opportunity to kind of lead that market more so than anybody else. While these other platforms, while they dabble, they'll add it, they'll put it over there on the side to see if they can, but they can't make that their bread and butter. No pun intended. But that's why.
Again, like to your point, like you say, when you look at these platforms, like a good friend of mine says, even from an influencer standpoint, like look at the ones that generate the most ad revenue, because those are the ones that have the revenue. And like you said, if Facebook's pulling in that much money from ads, or I would tell people like, look, if it's free, you're the product in some capacity, right? And so you got to realize that's how they're using these tools. Like from a fan base standpoint, how do you get people to really understand the value proposition and say like, look, you can go over here and do stuff and try to wait for these creator reward programs to kick in, or you can actually start talking to your audience and get subscriptions.
Well, that's a layered question. You could ask that question: how do you do that as a white founder with capital, or how do you do that as a black founder, first time founder that doesn't have VC dollars, and that way? So number one is you have to convince people that you have the ability to build a product that's comparable to an Instagram or Facebook as a black guy coming from the music business. That's the first thing you got to do. You got to win the trust of people, and then you have to win the trust of people enough for them to invest in you to do that. So I think the first thing that I had to do was build something and validate it in a way that no one could tell me no. So what I don't want to do is, and most of what I know about tech, or my perspective of tech, comes from being in the music business. So you don't ever want anybody to tell you no. So if you walk into an interview and no one can kind of throw something at you that you don't know already, then do that. So one of the first things that I did for one of the first VC meetings that I took was with a white woman at a VC company. And I knew what separated Fanbase from every other platform, because I recognized that black culture is literally the economic engine of social media. When you demystify things, so I didn't go to college, but all I try to do is take something and break it down to the simplest form that I can comprehend, which is, if black culture left all of these apps would be void of the fun shit that keep people on them, that entertain them, while we fill all the other stuff in the middle. And so when black culture is the gas and the app is the vehicle, then who's making all the money? It's the person that owns the car, who owns the infrastructure, right? So I'm like, well, somebody's got to build infrastructure. Somebody's got to build the infrastructure and then bring those two worlds together. And then that scares a lot of people, because the people that benefit from black culture and these VCs are looking at this guy like, so wait a minute. So you're telling me that the culture and the infrastructure are going to be owned by black people, and it's going to circulate. It's going to circulate. So they're going to own the app, and they're going to use the app, and they're going to make money. Like, oh shit. So don't nobody want me to succeed. So, cause that's why you've never really seen anybody in this space succeed, because you got to be crazy to try to do this shit. But the one thing that the white woman VC told me in our first meeting, and I'm glad she told me that, she goes, why would you want to build something that's competing with Mark Zuckerberg and Instagram? They're giants. And I calmly told her, I can build anything that Mark Zuckerberg can build, but Mark Zuckerberg can't build black people. And that's the difference. And no one ever walks into a room and says that to them. Like, you're screwed. If black people ever get together collectively and just invest in infrastructures across every sector, I don't care if it's a store like Target. I don't care if it's an auto vehicle company like Tesla, an app like Fanbase. It doesn't matter. You're cooked because black is the cool of the world. It is impossible to promote something as being cool without the assistance of black people. It cannot be done. It can be romantic. It can be sentimental. It can be adventurous. All those can be done by white people. Cool, you got to have our dances. You got to have somebody from our culture. You got to have our music. You got to throw Montel Jordan in there. You need something in there to validate the coolness of what you're doing. And that is a $1 trillion value that black people do not leverage against any kind of business, nowhere near the way that they need to drive that value back to our community.
So then, what's your vision? It is again to own the infrastructure for more of these, not just for the application, but just in general from a cultural standpoint. Like I was talking to Ryan Wilson about this, and it was like, yeah, if you really think about it, there's not a place in Atlanta that if you needed to, rent out for 1,000 people that anybody black owns. You know what I mean? Like we don't own these levels of infrastructure, but you see us outside, you see us kicking it, right? So to your point, it's all about owning the infrastructure, starting to own those, as I say, like the streets and the roads and the highways that connect these different things.
Yeah, and so that's the secret of Atlanta, right? That's the gift of being in this city. I know you're heavily an advocate of Atlanta just as much as I am. And so I recognize that, and Atlanta produces a different type of black person. And I know this sounds weird, and I know because black people, I don't say this to offend anybody that's black. You just gotta be here to kind of get it. And so, but I always do the litmus test of people that are not from Atlanta to Atlanta, and when they get here, and I don't have to say much, I'll just invite them somewhere, and then I'll watch them go, "What are all these black people doing here?" And I'm like, "Did you hear what you just said? You're black, and the fact that you are surrounded by your own people makes you uncomfortable, lets you know that you have lived a minority existence your entire life. And the sheer sight of your own people existing and doing normal things, hanging out, having drinks, running in the park, whatever, just operating businesses, is foreign to you. And that is every day in Atlanta, Georgia. So I say I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. I've never felt like a minority in my entire life. In fact, I've never made money through the acceptance, permission of white culture my entire life. I've never needed that because I was in the music business. So it's like I went out of high school, didn't go to college. Once I got into music, I'm usually just making records and I'm selling, my music or whatever. But it wasn't a permission. It's not like I had to fight my way through anything. And then starting businesses and looking at other people start businesses and understanding how Atlanta was built off joint venture contracting and all the things that Maynard Jackson did to set up the way that black people can make money. It's just a different type of black person. And so you don't get Ryan Wilson's or you or LA and Babyface saying, we need to get out of LA and move to Atlanta and we're going to build a record company and make LaFace Records, which is probably the biggest black R&B label ever, produce some of the most iconic artists. Or Tyler Perry saying, let me get up out of it. Let me drive to Atlanta, Georgia, start doing plays. And Will Packer coming up from FAMU and doing Rainforest. You don't get those type of people except here. And then factor in the fact that layered into all this is a political infrastructure that grants the permission and the opportunity to scale your vision bigger than what you would be allowed to. So it's like, oh, you want to build a recording studio? Okay, in Cincinnati? No, you niggas can't have no recording studio. You want to build a movie studio, a black man, you want to build a movie studio in LA, Tyler Perry? No, Negro, you can't do that. But in Atlanta, the mayor's black. So, hey, mayor, I want to go build this movie studio over here at this military base. Can I buy that from you? Yeah, you can have 350 acres for $35 million. Done deal. Now it's the largest movie studio in the entire country owned by a black man. That would never happen unless there was a black mayor, because that land would have been sold to some white guy to build his movie studio. So that is the point and purpose of why I talk so much about Atlanta, because there's this relationship, and it is something that we take for granted, is the fact that none of this works without political power. None of this works without black mayors and all this kind of stuff. Fan base, I would have not built Fanbase in any other city. Again, which is why I say Black Planet is the last time we ever been this close. That was 2000. I say this, Brandon, dead ass. It's 2025. Between now and then, you and I know that there are tens of thousands of black people that have way more money than I do and are way smarter than I am, but no one built an app. So there's something missing, right? Because it can be done. There's no so what is that? What is that? Like what is that recipe that creates the environment for something like this to grow? And I say that it's Atlanta. You got to want to be here. You got to want to. You got to have the courage and the guts and be like, man, f these people, man. We about to do our own thing to be able to do that. And so that that energy is why Fanbase um, was important, and that was the challenge in saying, how do I get people to come to a platform and do that? Well, first I have to gain their trust, and I feel like I've gained their trust. Now I have to execute. But again, I've been raising money a lot differently than most of these other guys. I've had to do it $3.99 at a time, not here's $40 million and go build your app.
And I was just about to ask about that. I mean, I guess I have to disclose I am an investor in Fanbase. I was in the very first round, I believe it was. But like, what's that process been like? Because to your point, again, like these guys can, scribble out an idea on the back of a napkin in a coffee shop and get 20-30 million dollars, right? And then if it doesn't work out, everybody's like, oh, well, that's too much. It is what it is, right? But like, you've gone the start engine route. You've had one of the biggest campaigns. So like, how much are y'all at right now? Like,
So I say this too. We're at about 12 million, but collectively over 4 rounds of equity crowdfunding, I've raised $22 million, and then we close around. I would raise $27 million. Again, this is history. I have to say these things because none of this stuff ever gets reported. Like I'm the first black man to ever raise $27 million in equity crowdfunding for anything. Nobody's talking about that. I'm the first. I invented in-app purchase peer-to-peer subscription that Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, all these platforms are using now to try to put subscriptions. No one talks about that. So, and it's on purpose because again, it's like we can't let the world know that this innovation is coming from black people. And I say it because I want people to know you ain't got to be a rocket scientist to invent some cool shit. So, we've raised that amount of money, and it was a blessing, but it also became a passion of mine because once I got introduced to equity crowdfunding, it also opened up the idea that I can make you rich. So typically, when all these startups happen, it's a group of small, 10, 15 people get together, raise the million, 2, 3 million to start their company. That company scales, exits, and then those people wind up making 30, 40, 50, 100 million, $1 billion off their initial investment. What I love about equity crowdfunding is that it allows anybody to invest in a company and see a return at limited risk because the minimums to invest are not big. $250, $3.99. Now you can put large amounts of money. We have large investors, but the ability to say I could put $250 into a startup and potentially turn that $250 into $250,000, or $500,000 or $1 million. And again, you have better odds at investing in startups that way than playing the lottery or gambling in the long run. But again, and the rules, which were in place before the Jobs Act, which spawned equity crowdfunding, which was a regulation that only allowed rich people,
certified investors,
credited to be able to invest in early stage startups. Then so then all the white people got to invest in Apple, Google, Microsoft, Dell, Facebook, Uber. I always talk about Orrin Michaels. I'm gonna meet Orrin Michaels one day because I probably said his name about 10,000 times in the last 5 years. But Orrin Michaels was the smallest investor in Uber's seed round. Uber raised $500,000 in 2010 to get started. Orrin Michaels put $5,000 into Uber. Now, I'm not counting everybody's pockets. I know you got $5,000, Brandon. I got $5,000. Even I didn't. Me, you, and other people could get $500 a piece and put $5,000 into Uber. In 2019, 9 years later, when Uber went public, that $5,000 was worth $24 million.
Yeah, that's a flip.
Exactly. It's a flip. It's like, oh my God, right? But again, there is no one knew if Uber was going to fail or succeed, but just the opportunity to try. But my point is, they can gamble on Uber, but you can only go gamble at the lottery And in Vegas,
Well, even that's the point that always annoys me when I see people talk about that stuff. Like, if you would have invested $4,000 in Netflix, it's like, yeah, but also you leave another part. You had to be an accredited investor. You had to get an opportunity to invest because
to know about it.
in these deals, like they let who they want to get in. So to your point, you're actually letting people get in on the ground floor of a deal as well.
Right. And I don't think people, and so then my mind, I'm like, okay, you can invent a business. And I've introduced many people into equity crowdfunding. I referred probably 5 or 6 companies to raise capital. But what I loved about technology is the fact that the scale potential of a social media platform can get into the hundreds of billions of dollars. When I'm looking at Facebook has a market cap of $1.5 trillion, and I'm not saying Fanbase will be Facebook, but you know, uh, TikTok's parent company ByteDance is worth $300 billion. I'm like, man, that's a huge flip, right? So I'm like, if ByteDance can be worth $300 billion, I know that I could probably get Fanbase to $100 billion. And when I thought about that, I'm like, my first valuation was $20 million for Fanbase when I raised. So if you invested in Fanbase in that first round, that means whatever you invested, when Fanbase gets to $100 billion, because I'm going to claim it, whatever you put in will have that same 5,000x return that Orrin Michaels had. So if you put $250 into Fanbase in 2020, 2021, and Fanbase reaches a $100 billion valuation and somebody either acquires us or I go public, that $250 will be worth $1.25 million. Now that, for black people, is the largest distribution of wealth to black people in the history of the country ever. Bob Johnson made the most millionaires ever when he sold BET. I want to obliterate that record because now we can take that wealth and acquire other things and build things. You know what? You know how much Target is worth? Guess how much Target is worth?
Probably what, $200 billion?
No, 40. That's not a lot. It's billions, but it's not. So I'm like, oh. So imagine being able to say, okay, well, a whole bunch of people get together and black people, let's buy Target and make it our own black Target.
Well, that's the again, like even in a city like Atlanta, right? Like that's what I tell people. It's like when you heard things like the PayPal mafia and all this stuff, right? Like that's where this stuff comes from. Is people get on, they get in these companies go public, they get their windfall from it. Then it's like, you know what? Yeah, now hey, yeah, you go kick in 50 grand, 100 grand. I'm gonna kick in 50, 100 grand and go do this thing. Like, even when MailChimp, got sold a couple of years ago, like in Atlanta, I said it's great that it got sold, but the problem is it didn't create this influx of millionaires in Atlanta because again, when that was like a couple $1 billion it got sold for, it should have been at least 10, 20 millionaires that came out of that. And it was a very small amount, because it was privately held, nobody invested. But again, you think about these companies that happen in Silicon Valley. Like I talk about all the time. I have a buddy of mine, his wife worked at Airbnb when they went public. She was in customer service and she made over $1 million just because she was there. She was like a customer service manager. You know what I'm saying? Like, imagine if that happens at scale, and now all of a sudden you've got 100, 200, 1,000 new black millionaires running around.
There's 22,000 investors in Fanbase, majority of them are black. So imagine you have 22,000. I'm like, bruh. And I guarantee the next time I build something, y'all put your money into that one too. Like, what we doing next? Like, let's go. Because my point is, it gives us the ability to buy these infrastructures and scale. And that's the thing that's like, it's just crazy to me that, not being included in these deal flows and then being able to scale those companies, like you said, MailChimp. I mean, that is, again, a small group of people being able to invest and then that same small group of people get to take that money and do it over and over and over and over again. And none of that money goes to black people. And we got to start thinking like that. But the problem is that outside of Atlanta, you are taught that you have to infiltrate this system to gain wealth through that. And that is not necessarily the case. And especially now with technology, we're all connected. So we could scale. Black people could take any business they wanted to and turn it into $1 billion business overnight by will. We literally could do that. The problem, I think, is that we don't activate on the ability to do that because we don't have the infrastructure to do it. We're not connected in a way that we can do it, which is another reason why I think which makes Fanbase an extremely important company, because now you're taking technology that allows people to build community. So when people can have these conversations and circulate that information and do that just by people using social media on a regular level to be able to scale. So the equity crowdfunding route, and that's something else that I wanted to talk about too, is When you were just talking about those companies, though, that exit, here's the difference, though, too. I've learned a lot from watching tech companies and coming from the music business. Because, again, I understand publishing. I know percentages. I would ask anybody to go look at those companies that do raise that money and see how much equity those people give up in their companies when they take money from venture capital. 25% at a time, chunk here. And the reason why I spent $200,000 of my own money to build Fanbase, and I advanced myself that money from the publishing that I was making from licensing my music, because I didn't sell my publishing, so I had the money to do that. Probably saved me 20% of the company that I would have had to give up if I wanted to starting out saying, and then I would have had to have a board probably, and then let's say, and then so then the board thing comes and it says, okay, Ike, so Fanbase is worth now $160 million. I would almost guarantee you that if Fanbase had a board and it was other people on the board and they were like, Ike, sell Fanbase right now at $160 million. Come on, man, you did great. It's great. You'll be able to say you're a tech founder. You know, I might walk away with $20, $30 million, walk around Atlanta the rest of my life like, yeah, I'm the tech guy. Newsflash, y'all, I'm not in it for that. I'm in it. I'm trying to F it up. Like, I'm trying to run the bag so far up that everybody eats in a way that's a lot more powerful. And so boards would do that. They'll tell you that because they don't want you to get your vision all the way to the top. They're like, if he keeps going, this Negro is going to be as rich as Elon Musk. Yeah, he's going to be. And there's never been anybody that's as rich as Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg. We never had what I call a super nigga. I know. Excuse my language. Excuse me. I'm being candid and funny, but and what I mean by that is the amount of wealth that you could throw away if you wanted to that could change the direction of an election, right? So when Bloomberg ran for president, he spent $1 billion on his campaign and lost. He didn't even make it close. Imagine being able to blow $1 billion as a black person. But I'm not going to blow $1 billion. I'm going to take $1 billion and fund 5,000 new black-owned businesses, but only in Atlanta, Georgia, because you got to move here. Number one, you got to live here to be able to do it, because I got to make sure that Atlanta stays black, and we got to get a black governor and all that. It's all of this is done intentionally, in my opinion, or not even my opinion, fact by me. I'm intentional about this because I understand that for this to continue to grow, we need black political leadership. We need more black people in Atlanta. Atlanta's not full. Don't fall for the bullshit. And we need to be able to scale those businesses. But those founders that have lost so much equity in their company by doing the VC route and equity crowdfunding, I've been able to maintain and keep that equity. So they hate that too. So not only have you been able to raise $22 million, you haven't had to give up 80% of your company to get it. It's like, so now it's just a numbers game for me. So now Fanbase, I always say the apps are the artists, the VCs are the record companies, and the App Store charts are the Billboard charts. So I'm independent. I'm an independent artist as an app. I've raised $22 million selling stock out the trunk of my car, right? I'm not signed to Def Jam, or I'm not with A16Z and all these other companies. I'm out here start engine it, the indie label. So now all I got to do is make Fanbase a hit. And so when Fanbase is sitting up at the top of the App Store charts, my phone's going to ring. And it's going to be like, Ike, we want to invest in Fanbase. How much do you want? Give me $100 million at $1 billion valuation. So I'll sell 10% of the company. And that's how I've set this whole thing up, to say that not only can I scale the company, I can scale it in a way that gives me enough to raise capital to really be disruptive, but maintain control, equity, ownership, and be able to do the things that I do. And that's why equity crowdfunding is such an important thing for all entrepreneurs. That's any business. You keep control of your company. You can structure in the way that you can. You can scale your business. You don't have to get involved in all the, because we know, I don't know how many entrepreneurs that I know that have taken venture capital and gotten kicked out of their companies. They got forced out or whatever. The board fires them or whatever, or they can't say. I met these. I'm not even gonna say who they are, but I met a group of girls over the weekend, 2 black entrepreneurs that have a business, and I said, "Oh, y'all need to raise some money for equity crowdfunding." And they go, "Yeah, we took some institutional capital and they're not allowing us to do it." See, that's already a problem. And you need the money, but they're slowing down the ability for you to scale your business because somebody else is allowing you to tell you what you can do with your business. See, that's what the music. See, all that stuff with my dad. I don't want nobody to be able to tell me nothing. Don't if I can't have control, I don't want to be a part of it. And so, that's the challenge in scaling. Fanbase, but we're doing a good job. And now we've gotten some. Now because of this large round that we're about to close, I've been able to bring on some really cool people that allow me to really focus and actually scale the company. Because again, you just got to hire people that know way more than you. And now I've got some really good advisors. I got 2 advisors by the name of Alvin Bowles and Ty Ahmad Taylor. They were both at Meta. Alvin was at Meta for like 10 years. Ty was at Meta and Snapchat, and he ran THX for George Lucas. So these guys are like the shit. And they're my advisors in how to navigate this tech ecosystem, especially by way of even if we think about venturing into advertising, stuff like that. And then we have some great new hires locally here in Atlanta, 2 black women, and they're over product and product marketing. And so I'm just excited because I'm building the team that I know I always wanted to build, but I'm building it in a way that still allows me to keep the culture of the company but still be a tech company, but out of Atlanta.
No, man. Look, all the pieces are there. Again, you're doing it. You're doing it in public. And like I said, man, like a great product with a great team is positioned to go far. So again, man, congratulations on everything you built out. Before we get out of here, man, tell folks how can they support Fanbase? How can they invest? How can they support y'all? Like, give them all the things.
Man, startengine.com/fanbase is where you can invest. The minimum to invest is $399. You get 60 shares of stock in Fanbase. Download Fanbase, create an account, join the community. Follow me. I'm at IsaacH3 on all socials, but especially on Fanbase, and tap in. And if you don't know what Fanbase is, it's just a free social media platform that allows people to subscribe to you if they want to for content that you can put behind paywalls. And it's photos, videos, audio chat, live stories, long form, all there straight out of Atlanta, Georgia. So,
Man, well, I love it. Congratulations on everything. Y'all get y'all Fanbase up. Let's get it going. We got an account on there too. We got to get back on it some more. You know what I'm saying? We get busy, but look, we about to take this thing up, man, and get this thing going. So with that said, we out, y'all. That's the pod. Great. Woo, 50 minutes. Look at that, man. Time flies. See, good stuff.